10A, approve recommendation of Evergreen Solutions LLC to implement a new salary schedule.
There's a lot there. Motion by Reverend Butler, a second by Ms. Horn.
We do have public forum on that. Do we want to do that first? Very good.
Yeah. And then we'll discuss.
Paula?
Okay.
Thank you for coming, Paula. And if you will state your name and county residence, and you will have 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. Paula Hancock, Knox County Education Association. Madam Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent Riswick. A perfect storm in the teacher labor market has formed, and our students are withstanding the worst of its impact. While the teacher shortage is being felt across many states and school districts, the most critical resource denied to our students is an experienced, fully certified teacher, an acute deficit that threatens our students' ability to learn. Not only does it threaten our students' ability to learn, but it also reduces teacher effectiveness, and high teacher turnover consumes economic resources that could be better deployed elsewhere. The teacher shortage is real. The teacher shortage is large. The teacher shortage is growing and worse than we think. Teacher compensation is not just an issue of staffing. Effective teachers are the most important school-based determinant of student educational performance. To promote children's success in school, schools must retain credentialed teachers and ensure that teaching remains an attractive career option for college-bound students. Finding qualified teachers in mathematics, science, and special education are especially challenging. The erosion of educator pay over the years, coupled with the marginalization of the profession, has led to this alarming teacher shortage we are experiencing. To recruit and retain talented teachers, school districts must address the inadequacy of teacher pay by eliminating or closing the gap on teacher pay penalty. Wages than other educated workers with similar experience is crucial to building the teacher workforce we need. As your collaborative conferencing partner, the KCA's PECA team is committed to advocating for an improved salary structure and salary increases for our Knox County Schools K-12 educators. Our educators have had long increasing day-to-day demands and responsibilities, from bus duty to coaching, counseling to leading additional classes and buying basic supplies for their classes. Educators feel disrespected, undervalued, and expendable because our expertise is not treated the same as the expertise of other professionals. It has been said, and I quote, "If we genuinely want to do what is best for students, we must do what is best for teachers. If we are hurting teachers, we are hurting students." Inadequate educator pay comes at a high cost for schools and children who must deal with the ramifications of high turnover and teacher shortages. Now is the time for healing in our profession. Now is the time for our educators to be respected and supported. Now is the time for our educators to be restored to wholeness.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Lance McCold. Lance, if you will state your name, county residence, and you will have 3 minutes.
Lance McCold, Knox County. And I'm here to speak to you to encourage you to hold off on adopting this salary schedule. Since Tuesday, just Wednesday, I took some time and studied part of the recommendation for teacher salary schedule. And I sent you all an email. I don't know whether you've had a chance to see it, but it shows that over the course of 20 years, a teacher who started out getting the same amount of money as an administrator or some other staff person who's not a teacher would end up making $20,000 less than if they had been a non-teacher. The salary the structure that this program lays out has retention bumps, it says, but it pays for, but the retention bumps are actually underpay teachers make their raises lower 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and in the 50 years, you boost it up to the same place it would be if there was a linear thing. What it really does is it takes $1,000 increase a year out of teachers on average and puts $1,000 and saves $1,000 for the district for each teacher. Now, if you want to tell the teachers how much we value you, this is not the way to do it, because when they figure out that they're actually getting lower raises than people who are not teachers with it in the system, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, you guys don't value us. So I want to, that's something to be concerned about, but you've had 2 days to look at this thing, and there are other things that we don't understand about it. They're talking about compression and how adjustments they're going to make to avoid salary compression. So now what exactly does that mean? Do you board members really understand how they're going to do that, what that is, and who the beneficiaries and who the losers are in that? There's also talking about there's people who are already being paid over market values. What's going to be happening to them? My conversation with Mr. Bolton suggests that what they're going to do is they're going to put them in a different salary schedule than the one they would naturally be. So they will be, it look like they're being paid, their over market pay will continue as long as they're with the system. My point is, you don't really understand what's in this salary schedule. And you haven't had time to do it. You have the option of put this off, actually understand it's in this thing, and vote on it next time you meet. When is your next meeting? I guess it's the budget meeting. But you don't really understand it, and I don't think you should vote on it now. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, that concludes public forum.
Thank you, Mr. Triplett. All right, we'll move on to discussion of this item. Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to let the board know that I'm going to recuse myself from the vote on this. I don't necessarily have to, but I feel like I should, because I have always said that when my time on the board ends, I would want to go back to my classroom. So I feel like, even though I'm not currently a teacher, that I would be voting on my own salary, and I don't think that's right. So I will be recusing myself. That said, I share some concerns about the speed with which we are doing this. I think it would behoove us to wait until closer to the budget, even if we did it as a special called meeting right before our other special called meeting to talk about the budget. And part of the reason I think that is because it took me until today to even think I should probably recuse myself. That didn't even strike me until today. And that tells me right there that this is being moved a little quickly. I've had more phone calls and texts about this with really confused questions than I've had about a lot of things in a while. So I want to ask some of those questions and just also really think about the fact that what we are approving is a salary scale. A salary scale for a public school district is supposed to be public record. And we have not only have board members not fully seen every piece of the salary scale, the public absolutely has not seen every piece of the salary scale, and that's why they're confused. If we were doing this in a really open and transparent way, all of these pieces would have been laid out so that all of our employees understand exactly where they would be. When I looked up at the screen, I could see where I would be. I saw exactly what my pay would be if I were in a classroom today. If I were in some other positions in the district, I never got to see that. I would have no idea. If I'm a custodian at step 2, I've been in the district 2 years, I can't look up there and see where I'm going to be. Not only can I not look up there and see where I can be, there's nowhere I can look to see where I can be, because that information is not available right now to the public, and it should be. So that is my other reason that I think it should be put off and would encourage you to do so. So my questions. I think I know the answer to this one, but I want to be sure I do. Is there anything in this that impacts career ladder funds at all?
Madam Chair, Ms. Owen, I have a backup to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the answer to that would be no.
Okay, thank you. That was my assumption.
Right.
And so at some point I heard something about career ladder, not during this, but career ladder is not ending anywhere, right? That we have ever heard of. It's just rolling along fine? Okay.
Right.
Thank you. All right, so next is where do speech pathologists fall in the pay scale?
So, Madam Chair, Ms. Owen, speech pathologists would not be on the teacher scale. They would be on the general scale. I do think that there was some confusion in the presentation we shared on Tuesday, because the teacher plan we had labeled as the certified plan. So I think there was some confusion in who would be on the teacher scale versus the general scale. The general scale will have both certified and classified employees, and the SLPs would be on the general scale, on a grade band on the general scale.
So I haven't looked deeply at the speech pathologist pay scale. So is it possible that as time goes on, that wherever they are now, they would pass the teacher pay scale at some point? Are their increases going to be greater than teacher increases per year?
I think, Mr. Bolton, you want to speak?
So they would be, and I'll let Mr. Bolton come too, they would be on a different scale. So the market value for SLPs was different than the market value for teachers. So they would have a different progression. I'm not sure that I understand the question fully. They would have a different progression, so a different step 0 and step 20, yes.
And they are having difficulty understanding the question as well. They are trying to look at what is involved in their certifications to understand exactly how they could even begin to determine what their pay might be. And that's part of the issue of not having this put out transparently to the public, is they could also look up there and see what the teacher pay was, but they can't look and see what their own pay is.
Right.
And so that's a concern. Where do school nurses fall on the schedule? And what they want to know is the difference where RNs would fall and where LPNs would fall.
Sure. So RNs and LPNs will also be on the general scale, and I will say that each individual employee will get a notification of grade band and specific annual salary. So grade band that they'll be on, step, what that computes to annual salary for our employees that are paid on the annual basis. As you'll notice on the general plan, what is on the general plan is hourly rates. That is what Evergreen based the study on, comparing hourly rates across all of these employees, because districts pay people in different ways. We do also. We have some people working 8-hour days, some people paid for 7.75 hours a day, some people on 7.5. So should the board approve the general scale, then for every category of employee, that will be converted to an annual salary for those that are paid monthly. And yes, you're correct. All of those will be posted together on the website as the full salary scale.
Okay, so the school nurse who asked me this question said that she is currently paid on the teacher scale, and it was my understanding that that was a state requirement that we pay nurses on the teacher scale. So if we move them to the general scale, is that a problem?
So I may have to lean on Mr. Sanders. I believe there was legislation that moved through that did not make it to, right, that did not make it to TCA at the end of the session. But so the answer is no. Only teachers will be on the teacher scale. Everyone else will be on the general scale, but RNs will be slotted in on the general scale at market value, and the same for LPNs. If that
Where would curriculum generalists be on the scale? Would they be listed as teachers, or would they be different?
Curriculum generalists, so the facilitators or?
Any of those.
So yes.
Instructional
Yeah,
facilitators could be in
yeah,
there.
Right, instructional coaches, facilitators, general scale.
Okay. So looking at the bumps, this may be a question for Mr. Bolton. Looking at the bumps and using those as an incentive for retention, what kind of data was used to determine where those bumps should be for retention purposes?
Mr. Bolton may have more to add. Those would have been Evergreen's data that they used in their recommendation to us. That was part of the recommendation. So we can. I don't know that I have specifics in what they considered in making that recommendation.
Okay. The reason I asked that specifically is because there was a time when 5 years was a place where there was a dip in teacher retention, but I believe that is now around 3. And so when I look at 5, 10, 15, I'm not seeing something that aligns with where the actual dips are in teacher retention. So it concerns me that we are putting in something that is purported to impact retention that doesn't align with what the data currently is. Are there any supplements or stipends or anything else for a person who has additional endorsements?
So I would say generally the answer to that would be no, with the caveat that Mr. Bolton shared on Tuesday, is that one of the recommendations from Evergreen also was to convene a committee to develop payroll procedures. So they didn't recommend what those were necessarily, but just recognized what we know is that our current payroll procedures are developed around our current salary schedule. So should we move to a new one, then the team needs to revisit all of those. So I'll make that caveat that there may be some recommendations that come from that team. But if you mean additional, like if a teacher that is teaching one content area also has an endorsement in another content area, then currently no, there would not be additional compensation for that.
My thinking is more of a teacher who had an endorsement in a content area and went back and did additional hours for a high needs content area so that they could teach in that area.
So right now the salary study the salary schedule does not compensate or does not consider additional compensation for that, but we do still have our strategic compensation model. So if a teacher was not in a high need area that received a signing bonus and moved into one, then they could receive that.
Okay, thank you. Looking at supplements for department chairs, I assume that would be the same.
Department chairs would receive a supplement, so that is one of the things that will not be the same next year as it is currently under the ESSER-funded department chairs thing. So.
Okay. And will there be a separate schedule for coaching supplements?
Yeah, we do not anticipate changes to the the athletic coaching supplement, so that we anticipate that remains largely the same. Evergreen did not make recommendations on the coaching supplement, primarily because, as they shared, they vary. So there isn't a market value necessarily because coaching supplements vary so much from district to district.
Okay, so are we talking about that whole page of supplements that included? It included some administrators too on that supplement scale, or are we just talking about the lower portion of it?
I can't see it in my mind. We're just talking about athletic coaches. There would be no administrative supplements.
Okay. What about the supplement for head band directors and middle school band directors?
I believe, Mr. Bolton can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe those would remain lead teacher supplement. So if it's outside the scope of the the position that they were hired for. So the extra duties like department chair, lead teacher, those supplements would remain.
Okay, so the bottom part of the, okay. So I would encourage board members to look at what Mr. McCold talked about. It's really hard to look at the numbers up there, which are significantly higher, and then consider that there's a loss. But the same way that we came back and talked about the reasons for not stretching out our salary scale to more years so that teachers could get that money earlier, we're doing the opposite with the bumps. Because instead of spreading them out so that each increase is the same, we hold on to some of the money and hold on to some of the money and hold on to some of the money, and then in the 5th year, we equalize it. And then over the next 5 years, we hold on to some of the money and hold on to some of the money and hold on to some of the money, and then we equalize it. So more than an incentive to keep people, what we're really doing is paying for some of the plan that way. And I think we need to be really transparent about how that's working so that people understand that yes, it is significantly better. We can't really argue against raises. That's hard to do. But I think it's something that we need to look at in the future so that we don't forget that there is that piece that could make a really big difference if we did it equally across all the years instead of holding back and then bumping up. So I would encourage us to really keep all of these pieces in mind and to bring them back so that we can make adjustments to them over time and that we don't get really committed to this exact salary schedule, because I think there are a lot of things here that have not been anticipated and have not been seen that we are going to want to really dig into later. Thank you.
Ms. Bike?
Thank you. I've got a couple questions. So this looks like we're voting on these 4 pages, essentially. And I know that it's been mentioned before, but is there any guarantee that none of our teachers or employees or anything will be decreased in pay or salary or compensation, whatnot?
Madam Chair, Ms. Pike, no one is moving backwards as a result of the salary study. That is correct.
Okay. And then what are the implications in not passing this tonight and instead passing it in our budget meeting?
Madam Chair, Ms. Pike, that's of course what we will do is carry out the will of the board. What delaying may do is impact the ability to be ready if this were to be implemented on July 1. So that's one, and then 2, at the special called meeting where there is the vote on the proposed budget, if there were changes at that meeting proposed, then that would require some on-the-spot recalculation of the proposed budget. So those are two that I can think of, but of course we will carry out the will of the board.
My next question is that on the 4th page at the very bottom where it says KCS may value recognized certifications given, may is kind of like a very optional word. Mm-hmm. Is there a possibility of changing that of will or anything like that? Because I do think, like Ms. Owen mentioned, that there are many people that have put a lot into their qualifications and they really want to know that they're going to be compensated fairly.
Right. So Yes, like Mr. Bolton explained on Tuesday, once the committee that Evergreen has recommended that we convene, once they develop those payroll procedures, they will be published on the website. Ms. Owen also pointed out, made a good point on Tuesday, that should we associate those certifications or the degrees with the position that the person's performing, so that may be something that comes out of the payroll committee. I would be hesitant to change that to will without considering what type of certification and what type of position.
Is there a way to say that any current one that is already being compensated in an extra way will continue to be compensated, like having that in writing?
So that's a tough one to answer on the spot without considering all of them, because some of the qualifications were considered by Evergreen in making the determination of market value. So I would be hesitant to say everything. So, for example, this isn't technically a certification, but the administrative supplement, that supplement scale is going away. The dollars that are there for the employee are not going away, but they will just be paid on one scale versus a base and a supplement. So with little things like that, I would be hesitant to put an absolute in without making sure that we had considered everything.
And my last question, to just really understand like what exactly we're voting on. We're voting on these 4 pages, essentially 3 pages that have our teacher salary schedule, and then the hourly rates that are grade bands, and then this extra educational certification stuff. So if we're voting on that, is there, and I apologize if I've forgotten and you've already said this and you're repeating yourself, it's been a whole lot, that when you go through and start to look at where everyone is placed within this, are you getting teacher input? What is the group that's making that decision?
Evergreen Solutions is the group that built the classification rubric to place people at market value on the scale. So we are using the recommendations from Evergreen.
Okay. So are there any times where groups of teachers or administrators or anything are having any sort of input in this process?
So yes, in the compensation and classification study, Evergreen conducted, released a job assessment tool, released an employee survey, and did focus groups with our employees as well.
Okay, but not necessarily like after we vote on. So when we vote on this is, you kind of already know where everyone's going to be at based on what Evergreen has recommended?
But mostly, currently, we already know where everyone will fall, the range everyone will fall. That is correct. We will provide individual notifications to all employees, and that notification will also give them a path to ask for clarification, to ask any questions they may have. But no, the employee input was input on the job duties, the functions they perform every day. Is the job description that we provided Evergreen encompassing of the duties that they perform every day, and Evergreen used that for comparison for market value.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Triplett.
Okay, just a couple of questions. One, just to hear it for clarity, Jennifer, are you recommending we vote no tonight? Is that correct? I know you had a bunch of questions, seemed really concerned. I just wanted to get clarity on that.
No, I thought I was clear. I'm recommending that we take more time.
Okay. And then, Ms. Hancock, I know we had to cut you off. You only had 3 minutes, but KCA supports this decision. Is that correct?
To say it to the end, but in accordance to the Collaborative Conferencing Act, the Knox County Education Association with the management team of the board for PECA collaborative conferencing, we did get consensus for this to move forward.
Perfect. For me, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. There are a few things that are easier yeses for me than this. I don't know what else. Maybe the playgrounds for children. I don't know. That was an easy yes. That's always a good move. But I mean, Mr. Bolton, Ms. Hemmelgarn, I know you put a lot of work into this. And when we vote yes tonight, you'll have a lot of work to get all this information out and get it all figured out by July 1st. So your work is, in some ways, just beginning. And so I appreciate all the work. I think Knox County's done a great job, Mr. McPherson and others making the decision to pay down some debt ahead of time. I had my budget meeting today, and so the work they've done to save money in other places to be able to absorb this whole lump sum is pretty impressive. They put that kind of work in and figured out a way, frankly, to find $40 million is just an incredible. That's not something you get out of your couch cushions, So I appreciate the work that they have done to make this happen. And so, I mean, frankly, to be honest with you, there really are a few things that are easier yeses than raises for teachers. We have gone through Evergreen, and they have said the market value, it is their recommendation based on market value that we do the steps the way we do them with the extra bump in the 5th year. So that is not a taking money out of their pocket in any way. That is just a fair market value that they recommend. Nobody's getting a deduction in pay. The vast majority are getting an increase in pay, some of them an incredibly significant amount. I have heard from several principals how thrilled they are that the pay increase that their secretaries will get. They hold it all together in a lot of ways. And so I've heard just so many overwhelming positive comments, even the questions that have been asked, I felt very comfortable answering. So to be honest with you, I think it would be in many ways disrespectful of us to our teachers to vote no on this. I think it's an absolute yes, and allow Mr. Bolton, his team, and Jennifer to get to work on figuring out how they're going to implement all this and get all that information out to teachers. So that's my opinion on that.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hemmelgarn and Mr. Bolton. You all have done a lot of work, and I know a lot of other people have as well, and appreciated the time I had for a few minutes before this meeting and the time at the budget meeting, and also getting access to the whole report. That was good reading. I mean, I was really, I thought it was good work. I thought it was a good work product, and appreciate the work that's gone into it. I want to make sure that I'm clear on something. What's driving a lot of Evergreen's recommendations to us is alignment to market value. Is that fair to say?
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson, yes.
There's a lot of other objectives you could try to meet in a shift in a salary schedule. And one of the approaches that you could take, and I think this is where it gets real personal for people, is you could try to say, well, how does this job align to this job in terms of value, and compare people to one another, positions to one another, which is not what this is doing, correct? That's not the objective of it.
That's correct. That is not the objective. I believe that Evergreen would agree with our belief that every position in Knox County Schools is equally important to completing our mission, and some of those we are currently paying closer to market value than others.
Which is why at the end of this, no matter if the objective was to get closer to market, there will be some who are going to experience more significant raises than others, correct?
That is correct.
And that's not an indication about how we value individual or separate positions. That's just saying, hey, the objective was to get closer to market, and this is what market looks like.
Absolutely.
That's fair? Okay. So one technical thing that I think could be helpful is on the document that we received, the hourly rates by grade bands, that actually is not labeled the general scale, which could be helpful. I don't think people necessarily know what that scale is if they just look at it. Also, in that one, you have grades running 0 through 20 across the top. In the teacher one, you have grades running down as a column, which can also be confusing. And actually, the rows, I don't think in the hourly rates by grade bands is actually labeled. I don't know if the general public, I don't know what 101, 102 means. I know the end result of it is that's the classifications, and that's where you're going to put certain positions. But I think having a label on the rows could be helpful, because there's nothing identifying what the 101 and 102 is. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I think that could be helpful too. And so to Ms. Owens' point, it is really easy it's fairly easy right now for a teacher to look at this because they're the only people on that scale, and they can say, I can kind of work my way into figuring out about where I'm going to be. But we have a whole host of employees that can't, right? And there's a decision that's been made to, in the beginning, say, hey, we're going to publish the teacher or a draft of the teacher scale. Now, they're the only ones on it, right? So it's kind of obvious. But there's been an intention not to say where everybody else is going to be. And Ms. Simorn, you already mentioned that you feel like you all have a pretty good idea where people are going to be, different positions, not individuals, based on that classification rubric. Can you share why? And I'm not asking this antagonistically. There's an intentional decision that's been made to not do that, right? You could have chose to do it. So can you take us through the thinking of why you didn't do that?
Sure, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson. Yes. What we want to do is we are very excited about this. We're excited about the impact that this will have on all of our employees. When we share the information, we want to be 100% accurate. Evergreen has made recommendations for placement of all categories of employees, also all specific employees in the district. And so Mr. Bolton and his team are meeting with every department chair in the district and going over all of those to make sure that we haven't missed anything. To make sure that, for example, we discovered one where employees were reversed. So
Right.
just checking every single employee and employee category to make sure that they all line up before publishing the full
So then
list of employees and employee amounts.
Is it fair to say then that you haven't made that known yet because the last thing you want to do is retract?
Absolutely.
You don't want to be like, oh my gosh, we goofed. So sorry.
Right.
We thought you were going to get this and,
Right.
and you're not, right? I can get that. I mean, I get that from a process standpoint. I also get the desire of everybody who's watching this in Knox County Schools right now trying to like map themselves out
I
and
do
kind of
too,
figure out where
yes.
they're going to be. I totally get that too. Also, I know because I did read the whole packet, and you all mentioned this too, there's 7 recommendations, correct?
Mm-hmm. There are.
You're bringing only one recommendation for approval, right? Because that's the 3 pages we have.
That's the conversion to the new salary
Right.
scales. Yes.
Should the board anticipate you all bringing other recommendations, or do you feel like you have the authority through the superintendent to act on all the other ones except for this one? And then do you have some sense about how you're going to act on the other ones? You've identified some things like starting this committee already that you intend to do that.
Sure. So I believe that right now this is the only recommendation for approval. The other recommendations we intend to take in some capacity. One of them is the classification system on how we slot employees into, or how we place employees on the new scale, determining market value through the classification system. So that's all contingent on the new salary schedule being approved. I will say, like we've discussed in the individual meetings, some of the recommendations are for the future,
Sure.
What we may need to do in the future to maintain. So implementing those right now, we would not do because those are for some time in the future. One of the recommendations is to convene the committee, like Mr. Bolton described, to develop payroll procedures. So I believe that the vote, the one that would be required for a vote is the move to a
That's
new
what I want
salary
to get at. So
schedule.
required by what? Because I think it's important for the school system and the general public to know that there's some recommendations you all can just act on, and then there's some that need a vote. And so why is this one is it requiring a vote, demanding a vote?
Sure. So their board policy does say that the board will set teacher salaries. And in addition to that, this is a huge budgetary commitment.
Sure.
And also a huge shift in the way that we approach compensation. We have not made a change of this magnitude to our salary schedules in decades.
Right.
And so are bringing that before the board before we move
And
in
then-
that direction.
And then all other recommendations are really dependent on this one, right?
Correct.
Depending on what you do on this will affect all the other recommendations. One of the recommendations that was in there was doing some micro studies year to year, but also doing kind of another deep dive every 3 to 5 years.
So one of the recommendations was, once we transition to the new scales, should the board vote in that direction, that if we are experiencing hard-to-staff areas on the new scales, that we consider whether specific positions should be identified for an additional salary study. And then, yes, another one of the recommendations was we consider every 3 to 5 years doing a comprehensive salary study.
So I want to hone in on that one for just a second. You mentioned when you first presented this to us last year that you all were looking at doing a study, that we haven't done one in 20 years. I think what we don't want to do is like wake up in 20 years and realize, oops, we did it again.
Right.
So I don't know where the board could act on that, if that makes sense to put that in policy or something. I don't know if that's where that should live, but the idea of codifying the practice that at least every 5 years we do a salary study, I think could be good. So I would challenge the administration to give some thought about, one, do you all really want that? But also, what's the right mechanism to ensure that does happen as leadership changes, as board changes, all the type of thing? Because that's why a salary study hasn't been done in 20 years, because there was nothing that codified it that said we're going to do it at some frequency, right? So nobody made the intentional decision to not do it for 20 years. It just happened, right? So and then I think I have a question. I think it's for Mr. Bolton. And I know you all were not directly copied on the email that Lance referenced. It was only the board. Has anybody in the administration seen that email? Have you all seen that math?
Yes, I have seen the email. I have not done the math. I have not checked the math. I've just seen the numbers.
Yeah, I didn't look at his formulas and all that. He didn't send his spreadsheet and all that, which is completely fine. But to me, I think what he's trying to articulate there, and I don't know if it's right or wrong in terms of his math and all the things, but I think the question is, what's the total value of somebody's compensation or a teacher's compensation over 20 years if you break it out this way versus if you break it out this way? We know that in the general scale, I think this is right, that it's a 65% spread all the way down, correct, between low end and high end. It's actually not 65% on the teacher scale. I'm pretty sure, I didn't bring my packet with me. I left it on my coffee table. I think the Evergreen notes say it's actually 50-something%, but in my math, it's 63% every time I do it. That's the difference. So 2 questions. One is, why is Evergreen making a recommendation for a different spread for the teacher scale versus the general scale? And then to me, it's novel in the sense of I didn't think about it, I didn't beat Lance to it, but to me the idea of looking at total value is probably not a novel idea. I'm assuming you all probably have done some of your own math, even if you haven't looked at his. Can you talk to us about that in relationship to what Ms. Owen was pointing out in terms of the bumps? There was some intentionality to do it at 5 and at 10, but also curious about the total value, because I think, that's worth something.
Madam Chair, board members, I think, now this is just speculation. I've not put paper to pencil, and so I need to do that. But if you look at that percent that you've increased, what is not included in that would be the full spread of those additional degrees. So then if you add, for example, for the largest spread of $5,000 to it, you may come closer to that 68% when you're looking at the full range spread. So you have that compression because it's only on 2 bands. But I have not done the full analysis on what it would look like in terms of a career.
Yeah, and Lance, when he did it, he didn't. He sent us if it's just equalized, but there's no way to do it for another position because we don't know where any of these other positions are gonna live. To me, that's an interesting. I'm not suggesting that we necessarily postpone our decision, although. If we oopsed into that, like, oh my gosh, we didn't realize we were potentially taking $20,000 away over the life of somebody's 20-year tenure as a teacher, to me, that's like, we should probably think about that. I mean, I get the reason to do incentive bonuses, and a lot of what I see in here addresses a lot of the challenges that I read through my work at Georgetown and my certificate for education finance. I mean, I get all that, but that's the one thing that is interesting to me, and I'm wondering if the school system has considered the trade-offs of doing those larger bumps without increasing the total over the 20-year period, right? Because then in effect what you do is you do decrease the value of the life of the tenure. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I don't know.
I will say this, I'm just speaking as an old math teacher, I
Yeah.
think when you look at that number, I don't think that you would see a difference between that because you're looking at values that have been equalized over a longer period of time. So I think that it's not necessarily the case that you would see any withholding of money because you're looking at the same spread over a period of time. So for example, if you're looking at, what you're looking at is a stair step. And so the midpoints of each stair step are going to be exactly the same. So as you round it, there's not going to be any kind of difference between what a person that progressed through those would be as compared to somebody who progressed at equilateral steps. I think the area under the curve, so to speak, would be equivalent in both of those scenarios. I've not put paper to pencil, but just thinking through that process, it looks to be the same.
Yeah. Thank you.
I know Ms. Horn, you wanted to speak, and then Ms. Christie. Did you have, I think we have some guests here from the
Well,
board
I
on that.
just had a question. I don't know what, this might be a Mr. Sanders question, but I know Carter Elementary has been waiting, and they have to get up really early in the morning. I don't know if there's any way we could,
Yeah.
there's no,
Motion on-
sorry, Carter Elementary.
No.
I tried, just so you know, I tried.
Yeah, Ms. Horn?
Okay, I'll try to make this quick. I'm sorry, y'all are waiting. Okay, so I just want to say thank you to the staff for all the hard work to get to this point, and even going back to last year's budget, because obviously that's part of what's causing us to be able to be able to do this. And you know, if we think back many times over the past several months, we've had so many conversations that centered around the fact that we need to be able to pay custodians and secretaries and nutrition more so that we could retain those folks. So to be able to bring them up, this mic is going in and out, I'm so sorry. But to be able to bring them up to market value is tremendous. And so I'm very thankful for that. And there are still a lot of questions, and it's hard to have those questions. But I know that I hope that the staff can be patient, hearing that the big takeaways that all staff will have increases, some at higher percentages than others, since some are already paid closer to market value. But the fact that everybody will be getting an increase is great. And just to make sure, I know you said this already, Ms. Hemmelgarn, but just to make sure everybody knows that you will be coming out with the same kind of salary, the teacher scale that we're seeing, where you can see the increases year to year. You'll be coming out with that same scale for each job classification. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Ms. Horn, that is correct. So if the board approves, when we post the full new salary schedule on the website, it will be very easy to understand what someone paid on an annual basis would make. So we will convert for our 200-day, our 211, our 221, 255 into
And
annual
also
salaries.
for SLP and instructional
Right,
coaches,
yes.
all those pieces.
Yes.
So I think that those answers will come. And I think that having that transparency will also help us be able to retain staff, because we're obviously competing with those around us. So that will help us retain staff, which I think is huge. And so it's difficult to approve this without having all of the answers that we want. But if we approve this now, that allows them to get to work on this. And I think that's what is important. And I think just, again, tremendous that we're able to have this opportunity to make sure that all of our employees are being paid market value. And I think that's what we need to hear, is that that's the goal, is to get everybody to be at market value. So thank you for the tremendous work that you're doing and that you will be doing, because it's a big job that you have ahead. Thank you.
I'd like to call the question.
A second.
So we vote on that, right?
Yeah. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Is it clear that I recused on that?
voting on calling
Yes,
the
I
question?
can, so
Thank
you
you.
recuse yourself on
Yes.
calling for the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm calling for the question
We
or
were calling the question. Yeah, we haven't voted on the item yet. Okay.
So do you want me to mark you as a favorable vote on that, Ms. Owen?
Now we'll vote on the original motion on 10A. Yeah, can we please do a roll call vote? Absolutely.
Dr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Bike? Ms. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Triplett?
Yes.
Mr. Wright? Ms. Christie? Ms. Henderson?
Yes,
So that's 8 yes votes and 1 recused vote.
motion carries.